Welcome into the Paul Kuharsky podcast. I'm Paul Kuharsky of paulkuharsky.com. This is part of 440 Sports. I have fulfilled my contractual obligation and I've mentioned my name 3 times. Here's what we're going to talk about today. Stadium progress. We are nearing the dotted I's and crossed T's for the new Nissan Stadium, whatever it'll be called. That's going to be finalized before the end of the month. The outlay from the Titans has led me to questions about Amy Adams Strunk's finances. I'll touch on that. The bulk of this podcast is going to be a conversation with Matt Harmon of Yahoo Sports and of Reception Perception, a very well named site. He is expert on wide receivers. The Titans are not. So we'll talk to him about what the Titans have and what the Titans need heading into a very big draft, obviously. And I'll wrap up with the idea of the Titans getting one of the 4 top quarterbacks in this draft, an idea that makes me really kind of cringe. We're brought to you by Jasper's, your neighborhood restaurant and bar done better. So stadium finances, the stadium paperwork has been approved by the Nashville Sports Authority. That was one of the 2 final steps for this team. The Metro Council meeting on Tuesday night ran way long, and they did not finish. So basically, they deferred what needed to happen at this meeting and was on track to happen, the second reading. They deferred that to the meeting coming up on April 18th. It'll happen on April 18th, and then there will be a third and final reading at a specially called meeting that will happen before the end of April. This thing should be wrapped in a bow by then, before the draft, really. And the Titans and the city should be in shape to have a ceremonial shovel in the ground this summer for a big marketing event and party and the like. But your parking's not going to be disrupted because construction's not going to start until after the 2023 season. So you'll be able to have one last season of regular tailgating at Nissan Stadium in 2023. Then real shovels in the ground will take place in that east parking lot, the big parking lot, after the 2023 season. And the disarray will begin while the Titans play in one stadium and build another stadium in the main parking lot of that stadium in 2024, 2025, 2026, with the expectation of it opening in 2027. So that's the course of events there. It's pretty exciting, but somehow opening in 2027 feels a lot longer off than 2026 did. So that's where things stand on that. Look, there's huge financial outlay here, $860 million plus cost overruns from Amy Adams Strunk and the Titans for the new stadium. And she has, since 2020, spent significant money to buy out she and the other third of ownership, Kenneth Adams, Barclay Adams, Susan Lewis. Amy Adams Strunk had a third. And Susie Smith had a third. Susie Smith wanted out. So the 2/3 that were in Nashville bought out the 1/3 that was not. That was a big chunk of expenditure. She bought some land in Williamson County that was costly, and now they're going to make this big expenditure on the stadium. I went to the owners' meetings in Arizona, and one of the big questions I had on my list is what kind of financial shape are the Titans in? So by the time you listen to this, I should have a story up on paulkuharsky.com that tells you what I found out in Arizona about the financial condition of the Titans for the football money that you might worry gets taken away by the infrastructure money. So stay tuned for that, and I think you'll be pleased to hear what I found out regarding that. Let's get right into this wide receiver conversation. A lot of curiosity of what the Titans are going to do here. They are obviously too thin. They're counting primarily on 2 second-year guys with Treylon Burks, who showed a good deal of promise as a rookie, but was also dinged up, and Kyle Phillips, who hardly played because he was injured. So Matt Harmon has thoughts on those 2 guys, on the top guys in this draft, and on other guys that the Titans clearly have some interest in heading in to the end of April, where they're going to add, I would hope, 2 wide receivers. Let's bring in Matt. So I'm thrilled to be joined by Matt Harmon from Yahoo and Reception Perception. I'm crediting him for a great name, and he said he didn't come up with it. But you're smart enough to use somebody else's great name, so you get credit for that.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Paul. Yeah, I'm very, very happy with the name being a great creation by a friend of mine, and getting all the necessary permissions to use it, of course. But of course, the work is the real fun part with the wide receivers and charting all the routes, and I've learned so much over the years, and I'm excited to talk about it today.
So, as a receivers expert, I imagine you don't like the Titans during the season, but you do like the Titans during draft season when they are as needy as anybody could be.
I mean, I did love them when a certain number 11 played there for a few years. That was a fun time. AJ Brown's always been one of the top performers in success rate versus man and press coverage, so he was fun. But yeah, this current Titans group, I'm excited to see how they put it together. And I mean, I could ask you like kind of what the team vision is overall, like what their plan is this year, and like going forward and kind of retooling that roster. That's obviously fun to track. But yeah, they're kind of I wouldn't say a total blank slate of a wide receiver room, but I think they could go a lot of different directions with this room.
I would say close to a total blank slate. The one thing that I'd been asking that they haven't come right out and said, but they want to be faster. Seems clear to me that they have to trade some size and speed, especially given that the fact that there's no, it's the wrong year to really need the great receiver at 11. Not that he'd probably be gone at 5 or 6, but that size and speed combination that they'd love, it doesn't seem like there's a magical one there for them. But I think it's time to trade some of the size that they like so much for some of the speed and maybe route craft that comes more easily. We'll get to that in a second. Let's start with Treylon Burks, who's their one big hope out of the AJ Brown mess and everything. What do you make of what he did in college, what they asked him to do as a rookie when he was healthy enough to be on the field? What kind of progress did you see from him there? How big was that transition? What kind of jump would you expect in year 2?
Yeah, Burks is a really fascinating player because you look at him as a collegiate player and you see some of his highlights when he's, operating on the outside in tight coverage, and you think, oh, this is like a big X receiver, your AJ Brown types. And I know he got like the AJ Brown comparisons by others. But like when you actually dialed into his usage, it was such a strange role they had him in at Arkansas. In his reception perception sample, which for the folks who don't know what reception perception is, essentially I'm going in over an 8-game sample for NFL players and for college players and charting every single route that they run in that sample, where they line up, how often they get open against press man zone coverage, how often they run each route type, how often they get open each route type. Their broken tackles in the open field, contested catches, essentially just trying to paint the full picture of a wide receiver. But really, what I've learned over the years is that everything starts with where you're deployed, because perfect example, one wide receiver is not the same as the other. The Titans draft Treylon Burks last year. They draft Kyle Phillips in the late rounds. Those two guys couldn't, be any different in terms of what they look like, how they play on the field, etc. So Treylon Burks in college had this very unique role where in his reception perception sample, he took 80.5% of his snaps in the slot or the backfield and 84% of his snaps off the line of scrimmage. And then in the first 4 weeks that I charted for the in-season rookie report, which is on the site, he was 18.8% of his snaps in the slot or backfield, and then 26.6% off the line of scrimmage. So essentially completely flipping his role, which I thought was fascinating because essentially then you're kind of asking him to learn a new position, basically, because you want him to be that outside X receiver, which I think is fine considering the frame, but you were going to take your lumps early on. And I think that was true before he had that. I think it was a high ankle sprain or something, or toe injury in week 4. Like, you're going to take your lumps there learning a new position as a guy like Treylon Burks. So I thought that was a fascinating decision, because I think if you wanted him to make like a day one impact, you'd take him and put him as like a big slot receiver, like we've seen, like he played in college. Juju Smith-Schuster was a player I think played a similar role. That was not the way the Titans approach, and I think it makes sense because of the offense they play. They don't spread the field with a ton of receivers. They don't play a lot of 11 personnel. They're a heavier set offense, as you mentioned. So I think a lot of what you saw from him as a rookie is taking those lumps, learning in that new position, and really, I'm kind of ready to believe anything with Treylon Burks going forward. Like, if he continues to kind of stay at this level and continues not be an incredible route runner, incredible technician, he could be a very good starting receiver, and maybe that's where he caps off. But if he continues to learn the craft and continues to develop in that position, he could obviously develop much further than that.
Yeah, he's like a lot of guys for them too. Like with the Titans, as injured as they've been the last 2 seasons, it starts a lot with how healthy is he going to be?
Mm-hmm.
How much is he going to be on the field? How much can they rely on him? But I think certainly he's an outside guy. Maybe they'll play more too tight, depending on what they do at tight end here, receiver needy. I think they'd certainly love to get Phillips back and have him be the slot. But they need to find 2 more guys here. One of them needs to be an outside starter pretty much. And the other one needs to be at least 3/4 type to give them some depth so that one injury doesn't completely undo what they have. So let's talk through the top 3 guys. I'm really curious, give me, a little bit of the most interesting thing you've found about them as you look at them, and then maybe how they fit into what we're talking about, envisioning the Titans as. Quentin Johnston certainly seems like the most Titans-like in terms of the build at 6'3" and 208, and he's sub 4'5". But there's questions about his abilities with contested catches, which is something that the Titans wouldn't like out of a guy that size. And feel free to throw in something about how these guys block at any stage, because I'm convinced they might go smaller, and he's not smaller, certainly, but anybody coming in is going to have to be able to block downfield if they're sticking with the Derrick Henry centered offense, which I expect them to do.
Yeah, this year's free agent class, with guys like Allen Lazard, Robert Woods ended up signing with the Texans, really got me talking about wide receiver blocking more than ever this offseason, which people don't like.
Titans fans love it. I mean, it's the first thing the Titans talk about is how a receiver blocks. Never mind deep touchdowns or yak or any of that. Hey, we're going to bring in a receiver. We're going to talk first about how he blocks downfield. Fans love that. They soak it up. They write it down in their fantasy draft sheets. It's popular.
Yeah, like, oh, man, this is a big-time blocker. Yeah, now I'm excited about this receiver pick. That's for sure. But it is important for these teams that do want to establish the run. I think Quentin Johnston is interesting because, as much as I think Treylon Burks needs to develop and take another step or 2 as a route runner, as a technician, as a separation-based receiver, he's a great 50-50 ball receiver. I think he's strong as hell at the catch point. He knows how, he has a big frame and he knows how to use it. Like, he knows how to leverage guys. He knows how to frame guys out and box out defenders. And I think he's kind of underrated in terms of how he times his jumps and his leaps and everything like that. Johnston is like the complete opposite, where Johnston at TCU, it's a simple route tree. It's a lot of go routes, slant routes, post routes. Every now and again, you're going to see like a hitch or some sort of crosser, but it's a pretty simple route tree, pretty stripped down. There are times where he runs past guys in man coverage. Like he has a very high success rate versus man coverage, 74.8%. That's one of the best scores in this class. It would have been a pretty good score even based in last year's class. The areas where he struggles is against zone coverage, kind of that timing and rhythm of a play. When do you sit down? When do you present yourself as a reasonable target for the quarterback? He struggles with press coverage as well. Getting off the line of scrimmage, he doesn't always have a concrete plan in terms of his release packages, in terms of everything that you're going to ask a number one X receiver to do. Now, obviously, if the Titans draft him, he would be a guy that they could get off the line of scrimmage. They could use as a flanker because you already have Treylon Burks growing into that X receiver position. I think it's a little samey in terms of Burks and Johnston, two guys that you have some questions about the separation, about the overall speed of your offense. Like, I do think Johnston is a little overrated as a pure athlete, especially because he hasn't capitalized on all that leaping ability that he has. But I do think he's more, and honestly, I think he would be a big reach at like a top 15 pick. I think he's probably more back half of the first, early half of the second. I compare him to a guy like Christian Watson last year. A simple route tree, questionable ball skills, but man, you get him on slant, post, go, deep over routes, he's going to make some big plays. So I actually wouldn't mind him as a number 2 receiver overall, but I think for what Tennessee needs is, they might want to sacrifice some size for speed and separation ability.
So where's Jackson Smith and Jigba fit in that? Seems maybe a little too slotty. The thing that's most striking to him about me is somehow somebody got Brian Hartline to rank his recent guys, and he puts him second behind only Harrison, who's not coming out till next year, ahead of Garrett Wilson, ahead of Terry McLaurin, ahead of Chris Olave.
Yeah, I've actually spoken to both Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, and they will both tell you too, Jackson Smith-Njigba is the best of the three of us. Now, is some of that like they're hyping up their boy, they're hyping up their guy. It's his turn to get drafted. What do they care if they say he's better? Sure. But it is at least notable that they've said that to me. They've said that to other outlets. Heartline said it. And I think what's so great about Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Paul, for me, he is the number 1 receiver in the class. And I actually think there is a tier drop maybe between him and the next like few players, or at least to me, maybe he's in the same tier as a couple of other guys, but I do think he, to me, would be my number 1 receiver on a board. But you mentioned like,
is he worth 11?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's worth a top 15 pick. Like he's the only receiver I think in this class that I think is worth a top 15 pick. I would be kind of surprised if he went 11, just because you mentioned the slot style. And again, what is the Titans offense going to be? Are they going to be more 11 personnel? Are they going to spread the field out a little more? Because I do think, similar to like when Justin Jefferson came into the NFL, and a lot of people hammered, he only played in the slot. He only played in the slot this last year with LSU. It's like, but you watch him play, you watch him beat man coverage and press coverage, the limited reps that you got. He was an elite route runner at the collegiate level. Same with Jackson Smith-Njigba, 75% success rate versus man, 81.4% success rate versus zone. Small limited glimpses against press coverage, only 4.8% of his routes sampled, but 83%. I mean, it's absurdly high. So I think he profiles similar to a Justin Jefferson, that if you wanted him to play, I don't think he's necessarily going to be that level of player, because, I hate to compare guys to like legit all pros, but I do think he could be a guy that plays more outside in the NFL than people think. I think he is just so reliable, great route runner, knows how to turn guys around. I mean, dig routes, out routes, those intermediate routes are his specialty. I think he's going to end up being like a quarterback's best friend. If they took him, it just Titans live in that world for a second. Like he goes to their 11th overall pick and he's played with Treylon Burks. Like I would probably bet that he ends up being a better player in the long term and like more reliable than a guy like Treylon Burks.
And is Addison the third of this? And do you have him second or third?
To me, I go Jackson Smith-Njigba, and then I really struggle at 2 and 3 between Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison is interesting because we've seen him be a big-time producer at 2 programs, and it definitely fits the archetype of receiver that I really like. I don't think he's necessarily an X receiver. I think he actually kind of profiles similar to a guy like Jahan Dotson last year, where smaller player, probably would get his best reps in the slot, but again, Ken Hackett as an outside flanker receiver. The thing with Dotson that was nuts was that he, both in the collegiate level and his first year in the NFL, was like an absurd contested catch receiver despite that size. What really makes, I think, Jordan Addison special, you look at his route chart on reception perception, his dig route, slant route, and curl route success rate is just crazy high. I mean, he is going to get open over and over and over again on those routes. So really crafty player. I think a pro ready player. Like if a team drafts him in the first round, they're going to drop him in as their starting flanker. And I think go from day one, cause he's pro ready. Flowers is interesting because I'm kind of ready to believe almost anything about where he plays, because unlike some of these guys, Johnston only lines up on one side of the field and on the line of scrimmage as that X receiver. Jackson Smith-Njigba only really lines up as a slot receiver for Ohio State. Even Jordan Addison, who you see a little bit of slot, a little bit outside, he's really only lining up on one side of the field. Flowers played everywhere at Boston College. He played inside, he played outside, he played flanker, he played X receiver. And even though he's only 5'9" and sub 190 pounds, he plays like a badass. He'll win in contested areas. He will win off the line of scrimmage. He's a great route runner overall, both deep, short, and intermediate. He's a bit of a mistake prone player though. He's a guy that will drop passes. He'll make errors after the catch, a little bit almost like a guy like Deontay Johnson, who great route runner, produces a lot, gets a lot of targets, but is a mistake prone player. That's why I kind of go back and forth between Addison and Flowers, because I think there actually might be a higher ceiling for Flowers. Addison just feels so safe to me that it's kind of a juggling act there in terms of what do you like it when with these smaller receivers who are probably going to play a little outside, a little inside.
Let's stick with our blocking theme. What can Addison and Flowers do downfield in the run game?
Yeah, that's going to be tough. I mean, especially for a guy like Jordan Addison, who's a rail thin dude. Now, Flowers, again, I will give him credit. This guy, Paul, if you watch him on film, like he plays with a ton of fire and a ton of passion and energy. And I think because of his route running and because of the way he approaches the game, he gets a lot of like Antonio Brown comparisons. Again, not only do not want to compare players to all pros, I don't want to do it to like guys who were top 5 playing the position, maybe all time. I mean, he was that good at his peak. So but I see where people are coming from with that. So Flowers, I think, would throw his body around a little bit more probably. And even if Addison is willing, he's just so thin, so low BMI, that would be a bit of a struggle to me. But, these guys aren't built the same way as this player, but one of the best blocking receivers in the NFL is Brandon Ayuk from the San Francisco 49ers. And he's not like Allen Lazard, 6'5", 220, 230, but he's just got a great attitude about it. He's got great technique. He's got a great punch. I do think Flowers has a little bit of that, but again, you're definitely sacrificing a bit with Addison.
You're hitting on these guys. I would have loved for the Titans to have shown interest in Ayuk, Dotson, an element that they just didn't seem willing to take. We're going to see what Rand Carthon's willing to do. Let's run, if you will, through some guys that they have shown some level of interest in at their pro days, at the combine, or with visits. Josh Down from North Carolina. I know he's also slottish and doesn't fit the old size profile. Does bring the speed that they're looking to add. Talk me through Josh Downs.
Oh, I love Josh Downs. 5'9", 171 pounds. Definitely very, very different from a Treylon Burks or any of these guys that we're talking about. I'm just such a fan of the way he is able to read coverages, diagnose in terms of option routes. I mean, that's going to present a whole new dimension to the Titans offense that we haven't seen over the last few years. I love the way he beats man coverage as a smaller player. He actually has the highest success rate versus man among the prospects that I've charted right now. A lot of that is playing inside. He's not necessarily going to be an X receiver who plays outside on the line of scrimmage. We don't expect that a player of his size, but just knows how to get open. He's also another player that, despite the size, is tough as hell. He also has the highest contested catch rate that I've tracked for these collegiate players, which, again, is crazy because he's 5'9", 171 pounds. I love Josh Downs. I think he would make almost any NFL team happy. Almost any NFL offense he would fit if you use that slot receiver a ton. Obviously, the size is going to be a concern, but he does everything that you want out of a smaller receiver playing above that size. I'm a big fan of his game.
Titans apparently really wined and dined Tyler Scott before his pro day at Cincinnati. I've read multiple places T.Y. Hilton comparison. Is that an accurate comp to you?
Yeah, I've only seen a few games of Tyler Scott. Don't have a full profile on him just yet, but I think I can see that in terms of a smaller guy who, again, you probably want to play off the line of scrimmage. There's so many guys like that in this class. I mean, this is, if they're looking for that speed flanker receiver, there's a lot of players in this class that could fit that. Tyler Scott's definitely one of them. I think he is pretty samey, but a slightly discounted version to a guy like Marvin Mims in this class as well. But yeah, Tyler Scott, I think he's definitely more of the guy that you're going to look for as an intermediate player and deeper player if you're looking for that speed flanker receiver that you can move into the slot at times. But yeah, typologically, archetype wise, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Trey Tucker, I don't know if he's just getting latched on because they're looking at Scott. Sounds quite a bit more raw.
Yeah. I think that's like maybe day 3 pick, maybe priority free agent type of guy that you might end up pairing with. But if they drafted him, I would imagine that that's going to take a little time in terms of developmental guy.
And how about Jacob Copeland from Maryland, who doesn't have the production really?
No, yeah, honestly, he's not someone I've looked at yet. So he's definitely a little bit off there. Tank Dell, though, you mentioned is interesting. Tank Dell is like, I mean, we're talking about they want to sacrifice size for blocking or blocking ability with size there. Yeah, that's going to happen with Tank Dell, but he's a guy that I think has legitimate pro level route running ability. I love the way he separates. I love the way he separates in tight spaces. I mean, man, he's going to be interesting as a red zone threat. He was great as a red zone threat in college, but sometimes that doesn't necessarily translate, but I do love the way he runs routes. I love the way as a deceptive player, he sets up guys. That's very appealing to me, and I'm interested to see where he ends up getting drafted.
So just circling back, if you're going hard as the Titans and really making a big move here, and they've been big players. I mean, Corey Davis, AJ Brown, Burks. Now, if they went first round here, that'd be what, 4 in the top 2 rounds in relatively short order. And you can set yourself up with Burks, Smith and Jigba, and conceivably Phillips as your slot. Maybe go a little bit back to more frequent 2 tights with Chigakonkwo. And I would expect an incoming inline guy who maybe this is a good draft for those guys who could stay in, help a tackle, but also go out and make a catch. What do you think of a potential trio if Smith and Jigba was the guy coming in? What did you think of Phillips coming out?
I liked Phillips a lot. It was featured in the rookie roundup on the site from last year, kind of like mini samples on some of the like day 3 prospects and everything. And I really like Kyle Phillips. I think he profiles, I know this is so like stereotypical white slot receiver, but he profiles so well as like a Hunter Renfrow type of player. I think he makes so much sense as a slot receiver that I love the way the timing and tempo of his routes, different than a guy like Josh Downs, who I'm a big fan of, is like explosive and has that great tempo. Phillips sort of sneaks up on you. I think he's a smart player in terms of where to sit down against zone coverage, and that's really important. I think with Jackson Smith and Jigba, it's really interesting because I do think he can play as a flanker. You're probably going to want him to be 50-50 slot or 60-40 slot, just because you're going to get the best out of him and he's going to hit the ground running. You don't want him necessarily overloaded with new information because he's only ever really been a slot receiver because we didn't see him play last year with the injury. But I do think he can play outside. I think he can win in those 2 receiver sets. And again, he's such a smart player that if you're rebuilding your passing game, you're rebuilding the way you're going to operate overall. I love that fit. I love that fit for almost, like I said, any team, because I think he can win in that intermediate, like the base NFL routes. And especially if this team is going to remain extremely run heavy with Derrick Henry and they're going to be a bully ball type of team, they're going to want to be an efficient play action offense, and they were so efficient play action offense wise with AJ Brown because, like, you fake the ball to Derrick Henry, AJ Brown has single coverage, and he's just going to thump corners on out routes and dig routes and crossing routes, deep posts, stuff like that. Jackson Smith-Njigba is very different from a guy like AJ Brown, but he can win on those routes. And really, those are also the routes you also want Treylon Burks running a little bit. I think there be some decent overlap between the two of them. I think if you're building like an idealistic receiver core, I think maybe even Jordan Addison might be a better fit. Just at the 11th overall pick, it's high. So you have Treylon Burks as your X, you have Kyle Phillips as your slot, and then Jordan Addison as your speed flanker receiver to stretch things out a little bit and also give you that crossing route appeal. They're a fun team again because we talked about the blank slate appeal. They could go a variety of different directions.
Yeah, and I mean, they need more picks. You know, it's so much being talked about the potential for them to go up to 3 and get a quarterback. I'd be perfectly happy to see him dump to 17, 18, 20.
Yeah.
Take a receiver there if they're not going offensive line where they are, get the receiver that fits there, get some more picks to get another receiver later, offensive lineman, inline tight end, edge rusher, inside linebacker. It's a long list. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting. Hey, I enjoy your stuff on Twitter. I encourage people to check out Reception Perception. Matt Harmon's been our guest on the Paul Kuharsky podcast. Thanks very much, and have a good draft season here.
Appreciate you, Paul. Yeah, stay well and stay busy, man. I know we all are here leading up to the NFL draft. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Thanks again. So you can follow Matt on Twitter at @MattHarmon_BYB, at @MattHarmon_BYB. This podcast is brought to you by Jasper's. I hope you're getting familiar with them. Great restaurant and bar on West End in Nashville. Free games and free parking to help occupy your time down there. Let your hair down. Figure of speech from me, obviously. Shuffleboard, Papa-Shot, and more. There's a grab and go market if you're on the fly. I sit at the bar oftentimes. You can have a business meeting there. You can have a family dinner. You can have a dinner date. Big screen TV to catch the big game. The Bolognese is top of my list on the menu there. Really lively place, friendly, great food, great neighborhood vibe. I can't recommend you go there highly enough. Please tell them I sent you. I appreciate your support of me, and I would appreciate your support of them. And around we go, where we all help each other out. So please make a point of stopping by there as soon as you can and have a tasty cocktail. I should have one in my hand right now, clanking it and toasting you and them. And before we go, I wanted to talk about Mike Herndon's piece this week. He wrote about the cost of a trade. This is at paulkuharsky.com. Cost of a trade and what it would take for the Titans to get up to number 3. And unsurprisingly, it's pretty expensive to get up there. Now, he and I agree. You wouldn't go up to 3 with Arizona until draft day, until Arizona's on the clock. You'd have a deal in place and say, hey, we'd like to come up there if our guy is there, Now, I could see the appeal of C.J. Stroud and even Young, but I'm really having my trouble getting my head around Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. And I wrote this week a little bit about Bill Parcells' prescription for rookie quarterbacks. Now, I would think that Bill Parcells might say the circumstances of the guys who are coming out of college now may have changed. He last coached in 2006, I believe, and last was an executive in 2010. But he wanted a 3-year starter who had been a senior and graduated, started 30 games, won 23, had a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, and was at least a 60% passer. You know where Anthony Richardson is on that list? 0 for 7. 0 for 7. I'm not taking a guy that's 0 for 7 on that list. I have no interest in Anthony Richardson, certainly not in the top 11 of the NFL draft. there is just too much work to do with him. And I understand he's a very, very attractive athlete, but there's too much learning on the job for a guy that started 13 games and went 6-7. I know quarterback wins are not a quarterback stat, but that's what his team did when he played. It's just not enough, and there's too much work to do there. And Will Levis, his completion percentage was okay, but he's an erratic thrower and an erratic decision maker. And I think if the Titans were to take one of these guys, and look, I don't mind the idea that they're thinking they're high, they're not going to be this high, and now could be the time and go get their quarterback of the future. These just aren't good enough quarterbacks to warrant them making those moves, especially considering all the other problems that they have. And this is my firm stance on this. If you're drafting a Will Levis or an Anthony Richardson, then you're really doubling down on Tim Kelly as your new offensive coordinator and on Charles London as your new quarterback coach / passing game coordinator. I'd like to see a little bit of these guys before I hand over the guy who's supposed to be the next franchise quarterback, or I'd like to give them somebody better. And I understand that the Titans can't count on being in as good or better a draft position next year, but next year you sell the fort if you feel you have to go and get a quarterback. And Caleb Williams and the kid from North Carolina both stand to be much better prospects, not just than Levis and Richardson, but probably than Stroud and Young. But I really fear the idea that the Titans are going to give up significant draft capital to go get one of these two guys. And they could be doing, let's keep this in mind, they could be doing the necessary research to decide that they don't want these guys, to decide that they don't see enough in these guys, that they're not valuable enough, and that the wise thing to do is to take the offensive tackle, to take the wide receiver. We just talked about some of them with our guest Matt Harmon, is to trade back and gather more picks that could help them next year move up if that's the time that they envision that they need to go get the quarterback. But I don't know what the fan level of enthusiasm is for these quarterbacks. The Titans have not done well drafting quarterbacks since Steve McNair. And I think if they were to draft Levis or Richardson, that streak would continue. As much faith as I have in Mike Vrabel and player development, I don't think these guys are there to be developed in the same way that some other players they've brought in are. Now, look, I come in, I'll be critical of making the move depending on what they give up and how far they go up to get them. And then at a certain point, I've got to clean slate it and give them their fair chance. But I'm really, really wary. And I think you should be really, really wary too. And Will Levis or Anthony Richardson need somebody to throw to and somebody to play left tackle or left guard to keep them from getting killed. I don't like the feel of it at all. And look, the team scouting these guys hard and visiting with them says a lot more to me than Daniel Jeremiah, who's great, saying that the Titans have looked into a trade to number 3. And the Cardinals could be putting that out there. It makes sense for the Cardinals to put it out there to drum up business for number 3 because of the Monty Ossenfort connection with the Titans and all of that. But we go too strong with one rumor. Derrick Henry. The Titans were testing out the trade market for Derrick Henry at the Combine. Well, it was one rumor. There's one station in Nashville that talked about nothing else. I still may be talking about nothing else. And Daniel Jeremiah says the Titans are gauging the cost of moving to number 3. And we go from, they dip their toe in the water about something to it's a done deal. Again, no nuance. Calm down. You have to wait and see what happens. And sure, we can have fun conversations considering the possibilities. But the tone of some of the stuff makes it that doesn't differentiate between the idea that they may be considering something, difference between that and them doing it. You would think that all the websites should trade the draft order and have the Titans drafting third, the way some people are reacting to this news. My thanks to you. If you're not a member of paulkuharsky.com, it's a great month to get involved. Blake Bedingfield this week did capsules on all the offensive linemen he thinks the Titans should be taking a look at. Mike Herndon's piece on what a trade to number 3 would take. I'm writing the piece I mentioned about Amy Adams Strunk. I wrote this piece about Bill Parcells' criteria for quarterbacks. I'll have the big mailbag again, all for the price of $5.99 a month. You spend more than that on a fancy beer or a cup of coffee, come aboard. Try it out for a month. If you don't like it, you're not going to hurt my feelings by coming and going, but you're going to come and you're going to stay. My thanks to Jaspers for sponsoring. Please go check them out. And until I see you again, please don't block the box and be sure to lock your lock.